in a lot of the stories, either an extremity is being cut off or the person dies.
Yeah.
And I mean, as a kid, you knew he just drowned or he just burned to ashes. But it was like, okay.
It's the Germany Experience, the podcast about life in Germany as seen through the eyes of outsiders. I'm your host, Sean. Check out thegermanyexperience.de for more information about the show. And this week, I've got someone who's been a guest on this podcast so many times, she's pretty much a co-host at this point. It's Nina. Welcome back.
Hi, Sean.
Hello, Nina. And Nina is from Germany, for those who are listening to the podcast for the first time. And you have been on some of my top episodes, actually, Nina. I would like every time you're on, it's a winning episode. So you came on to discuss fashion. It is your charisma and your modesty. You came on to discuss fashion and carnival with me. Yeah. Which was got me my first 1-star review, but not because of you. We've discussed that before. And you came on to discuss, what was the other thing we discussed?
Youth words.
Youth words, that's right. And there was one recently, maybe not. I can't remember. I don't know how many
There was
times
another one. I think we did 3, but I don't remember what the other one was.
Yeah, I have a feeling you're just like always on the show. So welcome back.
Thank you, Sean. Always a pleasure.
And you're just back from vacation as well, aren't you?
Yes, we're both back from vacation. I just came back from Croatia.
Croatia? And how long were you there for?
2 weeks.
Okay. And that was kind of spontaneous because you and I have another podcast. That's the other thing I wanted to mention is you and I also have a podcast called Die Duda auf Deutsch in German, where we discuss, certain things about German culture, what it must look like to, my foreigner's perspective, let's put it that way. Oh, the words are failing
and
me.
And then I try to be the saving grace for the German culture and soul.
Yes.
But sometimes I do a terrible job and our listeners tell us.
No. Yes, they do. The listeners.
Because I'm just allegedly, I'm German.
Yeah. And I often get Germans writing messages about things that they're not pleased about. I say, not just on your episodes, in general. Sometimes I do upset Germans for whatever reason. I don't mean to. And just as a caveat, I do love Germany. I don't know why Germans think that I should go somewhere else. I've been here for long enough. It's because I like it. But anyway, that's not the point of this one. We digress. The point of this episode is way back, and this is something we also discussed on Die Deutsche und der Ausländer, the other podcast in German, is German children's stories, and specifically a book called Der Struwwelpeter. And what it turns out is this is a very classic German kids story book. It was written in the mid-1800s, so I think it was 1845 was when it was published.
Yeah.
But even now, like in your childhood, you got to know these stories, right?
And they didn't change the story. Now I think I read something because it's not politically correct.
Oh yeah, we're gonna get to that. To that.
But in my time, it was the exact same stories that they told 150 years before.
It's just you got to change with the times, people.
A progressive folk.
Yeah. One of the things I do like about it is that it's kind of an anachronism because you can see what things were like at that time and what the viewpoints were like. And it probably was, there's one story I'm thinking of in particular, it probably was progressive for its time, but the story by today's standards is still like, whew, okay. But we're going to get to that. But
to be honest, as a kid, it didn't faze me.
Yeah, but that's the thing. As kids, I don't think you always realize.
Oh, I did not. No way. Mm-mm.
But it didn't faze you because some of these stories are kind of brutal. Did that not disturb you as a kid? Yeah.
No. I mean, in a lot of the stories, either an extremity is being cut off or the person dies. Yeah. And I mean, as a kid, you knew he just drowned or he just burned to ashes. But it was like, okay.
Well, clearly, it's not having the effect that it's supposed to have on kids. Because I can tell you, I was pretty disturbed by some of these stories when
they're absolutely horrifying. And actually, how do you read these? I mean, I grew up and it turned out kind of fine, I guess.
But we come from a different generation. Okay, you're a little younger than me, but we're still a different generation to now. Back in my day, in South Africa, we didn't have seatbelts. I can remember we used to drive around without seatbelts. We used to climb all around the back seat and into the back of the boot area, the trunk and so on. We didn't care about that stuff. So it was different. And parenting was a little different as well. And apparently in 1845, it was very different.
Yeah. So the whole reason, the background of these stories is these stories were never intended to be a book. So they're not fairy tales. They weren't told to children for generations. It was, I think, a doctor that wrote and illustrated these stories for his kids for educational purposes. And all the other parents saw these stories and they're like, you gotta publish this stuff.
That's right.
This is great parenting.
That's right. There. So, and of course, so the way that the way that I got to know this, I'd heard of the word Struwwelpeter before, but I didn't actually know any of these stories. And then you sent me, as you often do, some fun stuff from TikTok, because I'm not on TikTok. I'm your
eyes and ears.
You're my eyes and ears on TikTok, and every now and then I get a funny video from TikTok. And there are these two guys. I think they're Americans, and if you don't follow them,
one of them
have to.
I don't know if he's like me, half German, half American, or if he's like just of German origin. But one of them is like the German part, and the other one is the dumb American part.
Yeah.
And then they make
They're called Calvin and Habs, by the way.
Great TikTok. Just follow them.
They're fantastic. They're fantastic.
So they either make fun of German fairy tales, children's stories, nursery rhymes, songs you sing to kids. Or their newest thing is he turns into this evil German by putting on sunglasses. Also very hilarious.
They're very funny. You have to follow them on TikTok because they're brilliant.
They're brilliant. Amazing.
And the video that you sent me was these two acting out one of the stories in Struwwelpeter. So Struwwelpeter is a character in the book, but then there are a number of different children's stories in the book. Yeah. And they acted out one called...
almost all of them out.
Oh, really? They've done others?
Yeah, they have various...
Yeah. So I need to go and have a look at that. But the one that you sent me was Paulinchen. It was the story about a girl who gets told not to play with fire. She does play with fire, and then she burns to death. Because that's the way these stories in Struwwelpeter go. So she literally ends up just being a pile of ashes, but her shoes are fine. And there were like cats in the story that tried to warn her not to do it, and then eventually...
Maus, die zwei Katzen, something like that.
Genau, exactly. So that's that, and then that got me onto it. Like, wow, what story is this? And I looked into it. And I ended up buying the book because I love the concept so much. And the one that I've gotten is apparently a reproduction of the one that was produced in 1917.
Yeah, same illustrations.
Same colors, and the same unchanged stories. So the book was originally published in 1845. The guy that wrote it was Heinrich Hoffman. And as you said, Nina, these were supposed to be lessons and warnings for children. And this is what Wikipedia says. Hoffman wrote Struwwelpeter in reaction to the lack of good books for children. Intending to buy a picture book as a Christmas present for his 3-year-old son, Hoffman instead wrote and illustrated his own book. In 1845, he was persuaded by friends to publish the book anonymously as Lustige Geschichten und drollige Bilder. So funny stories and what's drollige? Interesting pictures?
Like cute. No, drollig is more like cute.
Okay, they're cute, I guess, when they're not depicting someone losing a thumb or getting burned alive.
The pictures are fine until someone dies.
Yeah, the pictures are fine until someone dies. My favorite kind of kids book, really, when you can describe it like that. So the reason he wrote it was, as you said, to teach his children lessons. And I can see the point of these stories maybe 130 years ago, because like if you live in a wooden house, like many people did back then, you don't want your kids playing with fire.
I mean, you still don't want your kids playing with fire.
You still don't. That is true. Maybe I need to read them Struwwelpeter. That's a good point. That is a very good point. I don't live in a wooden house, and I do think that I want my kids not to play with fire.
I mean, I think most of the point he's saying are still valid, but he went over, like, he overdid it.
A little bit.
There's a line. There's a line, and he didn't tiptoe across it. He jumped it.
Yeah, but I think back in those days, there was no line, because I can imagine parenting was very authoritarian and, hardcore, basically. Kids were seen and not heard, and they did as they were told. And this was basically a scare tactic to terrify children into doing these things. And that's what I noticed when I read through these stories is, yes, some things are to look out for the kids' own safety, like don't play with fire. But most of them are to make the parents' life easier, that the kid is well behaved and
like
eats
the
their
Paulinchen
food.
One.
Yeah, but doesn't play with fire, eat their food, cut their
jump
nails.
around.
Yeah. So Struwwelpeter himself, who's this guy on the cover with these long hair.
He's the famous one that the book
He's
is named
the famous
after.
one. Yeah.
Everyone in Germany knows this.
Yeah, he's a very famous character, basically. And his story is just that he didn't cut his hair or his nails, and he ended up looking like a freak, basically. And people just called him Struwwelpeter, which is basically the least harmful.
Like disorganized hair. Like.
Okay. Yeah. So it's a children's book, but some examples of these stories, like we said, the Struwwelpeter. Then there's also another one, just as an example, Böse Friedrich. So this kid has fits of violence, and he has a whip. So like this kid is clearly out of control.
He would be a serial killer today.
Yeah, he would, because what he does is he like has these fits of rage. He tears the house down, and then he goes out in the story and he sees a dog. And of course, being Böse Friedrich, he goes up and he beats the dog. He kicks it, he beats it, and then the dog bites him, right? And then he has to go home. And what happens is he lies in bed taking bitter medicine, and the dog sits at the table eating Leberwurst and drinking wine.
So the dog's living the life.
Dog is living the life that got kicked. So I can see that's a good lesson. It's a good lesson. And then, of course, there's the Paulinchen one that we spoke about, where she plays with fire and literally dies. And then there's another one, for example, where a kid, I can't remember his name.
Hans Guck in die Luft.
That's another one, yeah. Hans Guck in die Luft. He's the guy that's
dies.
Always... Yeah, what was his thing? He's always...
Dreaming. He's a dreamer. Right? He's a dreamer.
Yeah.
He lives in his own little world.
Genau, exactly.
His parents always tell him, mind your step. And of course, because he's a dreamer, he doesn't. And he falls into a lake and drowns.
Yeah.
Bye.
Yeah, so don't be a dreamer, kids. I guess that's what we want you to learn here. It's like to get your head out of the clouds. Don't be a dreamer.
Yeah, it's the stories at least. The lesson you can take is mind your step, which makes sense. You don't want your kid to be run over by a car. But then there's the story of the Suppenkasper.
Yes.
Which is like he doesn't want to eat, so he starves. That's the story.
The end.
Eat, kids, or you're gonna starve.
It's so, and that's one of the things. Like I said, it's to make the parents' life easier. Like, eat what we put in front of you, or you're going to end up dead. Like, you're going to waste away. Because I think he gets thinner and thinner and thinner until he's like very, very skinny, and then he just wastes away.
It happens in a day. It's like not a week-long process. It's one of the shortest stories in the whole book. It's basically he doesn't want to eat, and then he's dead. So
that is okay. A little brutal way of terrifying your kids, but sure.
There's also the thumb sucker.
Yes, and that was the one I was going to mention as my next example. So, like, this kid sucks his thumb, and then he gets it cut off. He literally gets it cut off with a huge pair of scissors. His thumb, and there's like graphically depicted in the book of him losing his thumb.
The funny thing is, the reason why he gets it cut off is not a tragic accident with the guy, like with the guy that falls into a lake and drowns. No, his mom tells him, "I'm gonna call the guy, and he's gonna cut your thumb off," and he doesn't want to listen. So his mom is like, "You know what? I'm a woman of my word, so that thumb's coming off.
Can't suck your thumb if you don't have a thumb, kiddo. Come over here." So there you go. Don't suck your thumb. And it's parenting 101, and you can see the difference in the mindset, because obviously now we're all like psychological and subtle with our kids, and we use reverse psychology sometimes, but you can't be too manipulative and stuff. This was not an issue in the 1850s or 1845 when this came out. This was not an issue.
And do you know, like, there's another story. So basically one of the stories is a kid that cannot sit still, and basically today we would say he's like
I guess you'd say ADHD. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
In German, like in our daily language, we don't call it ADHD, or we don't say that kid has ADHD. We literally called it kid Zappelphilipp, which is the name of the story.
God. So it's not exactly promoting.
It influenced how these kids were seen. So it was never seen as a problem that these kids just need a little bit of help. No.
Yeah.
They just need discipline, because we're Germany.
They just need discipline, which I guess they didn't know about all these things back then. But what surprised me, as I said, is that not just I can understand, okay, 1845, these were things, but these are stories that kids were reading 20 years ago. I don't know about now. Yeah. I need to ask other parents if they read Struwwelpeter to their kids. But 20 years ago, it's not that long ago, but these kids were learning about these stories in the book.
I mean, not that I say I hope that these stories don't get read because it's it's funny. I'm an adult. I'm like, okay, I can differentiate that this is not real. Or as we said, there's a racist story, a super racist story in this book.
We're going to get into that now, yeah.
I know this, but you're reading this to a little kid. This kid doesn't know.
No.
So I think you should keep not the tradition alive, but I mean it's part of our heritage. But yeah, you should read this to an audience that can differentiate. You know?
Yes, and I think I would guess the version that I bought was specifically said it had the original stories in the original illustrations, and I liked it for that perspective because it's a real. Like I said earlier, some kind of time capsule or something of that time period. What was parenting like? What were kids supposed to be like? How would you convince kids to do something? And then also a bit about the cultural time. So that's why I really wanted to have this original book, but I'm surprised they still publish it because in the United States of America, for example, this would not be published. No. And the main reason is, I mean, these other stories I can understand, but there is one story in here called... I'll tell you what it is.
Story of the Black Boy.
Die Geschichte von den schwarzen Buben. Exactly. The story of the Black Boy. So this story is a black Moor, as he's referred to in the book. And then he walks past some guys who laugh at the Moor because he is, and the book says, a quote translated to English, black as ink. So it's already, you can see, okay, it's kind of heading in a good way now because there's this black guy and there's three kids laughing at him and the story is good. Let's put it this way: the heart is in the right place, and I think it might have been progressive for 1845, where he was saying, "Don't laugh at black kids or people who are different to you." But then the way he teaches this lesson gets a little messed up because he then goes, Saint Nicholas comes into the story somehow, and Saint Nicholas says, "Don't laugh at the black kid," because
which is a good lesson.
Good lesson. Loving the lesson so far. I'm like, okay, I can get behind that. Because it's not his fault that he's not white like you. That's kind of how the book puts it. So there's problem number one already. And then to teach the boys a lesson, he dunks them in black ink so that they are black as well. So the punishment for laughing at a black kid is to be black. And that's
messed up.
Hugely problematic. But like I said, we're looking at it with today's standards that we've learned through hundreds of years that this is that was incorrect way of thinking. But you can see that maybe this was kind of progressive. But yeah, teaching
the message, boys, like you said, they tried, but
they tried. Yeah.
And that's why I'm saying these stories aren't bad. I mean, the message is good, but like the way it gets,
Yeah.
But this is why this should be read to a mature audience and not kids, because kids don't know that. They don't know that.
Yeah, but I also think older kids should read this because I'm thinking more like young teenagers or teenagers because you can show them like, is this correct? Is this way of thinking correct? For example, in this story about
why is it not correct?
The black boy, and why is it not correct? And this is also what people thought just 80, 40, 100 and something years ago.
Yeah.
So from that perspective, I guess it's good, but it's a little surprising. And so that is Struwwelpeter, which is a big part of German culture. It's still known by almost every single German that you speak to, especially that character of Struwwelpeter with the long hair and the long fingernails. And that's why I wanted to talk about it, just so that listeners who are new to Germany learn a little something about German history and the culture. Kids' stories. And of course, Germany is also known for the Brothers Grimm, which are just as brutal. Some of these
like
stories.
The Disney stories. Oh.
I mean, the Disney stories have their own problems.
PG-0 version of the real stories.
Yeah. And I mean, the Disney versions...
Let me tell you, there is rape, there is murder, there is blinding.
Yeah. It is hardcore. And I mean, and even the Disney versions are problematic as well. If you like always princesses needing help and getting kissed while you're unconscious, it's not necessarily the kind of things we want to be promoting.
Kissed.
And at least they've only been kissed. Yes.
So, in case our listeners don't know this, in the original version of Sleeping Beauty, which is not a Brother Grimm story.
Not originally, no.
Not originally. They stole it from the French.
In fact, I think they stole a lot of things. They collected a lot of stories that were orally told. Yeah.
But in the original story, she's asleep. The prince has sex with her while she's asleep, and she doesn't wake up because she's being kissed. She wakes up because she's giving birth to twins.
Oh my God.
And then I think she comes, I don't know how exactly it ends, but it's something like she goes to the castle of the prince and he doesn't want to claim fathership, great guy.
Yeah. Yeah. So Brothers Grimm of those days was not much better than Struwwelpeter. And the other interesting thing that I learned from a friend is that the Brothers Grimm, what they did was as we said, they were like taking a lot of stories that were orally told or that were known for generations and generations, and then they kind of adapted them into the fairy tales that have now gone on for more and more generations. And they had a first draft or a first version of a lot of these stories with parents doing horrible things to their children, and it didn't quite fly. So they made it that the villains are generally always stepmothers or stepfathers. It's always the stepsisters in Cinderella or the stepmother in Snow White that wants to send her away. And it was interesting that they actually changed that to be stepmothers because people wouldn't necessarily believe that parents would do such horrible things to their own kids. And second of all, they wanted to go easy on the kids and say like, okay, don't worry, your parents are not going to do this, but your step-parent was. I'm like, what about people with step-parents? What are you doing, Brothers Grimm? and the other day I had to explain to my daughter, because she was playing a game with her dolls, and then she's like, and this is the stepmother, and she is Berza, she's evil. I'm like, what? And then I had to explain to my 6-year-old daughter that not all step-parents are evil, because that's all she gets from these stories. And I was just worried like one of her friends maybe has a stepfather or a stepmother. And
she's going to say something like that.
She's like, oh my God, get away, girl, get away.
And I just wanted, because you said the original stories were brutal. Oh no, like I didn't know this in the Sleeping Beauty story until I was a little bit older, but there's still original stories that we tell. For example, Cinderella. We still, like the version I got read wasn't the Disney version. It was where the sisters cut off their toes, and at the end the mother gets her eyes hacked out by doves. And then in the original Snow White, she gets her eyes pecked out, and she has to dance on burning hot shoes until her feet are like. This is the story I got read.
That's Snow White, yeah, because the queen comes to crash. The queen comes to crash
that was
the wedding. The queen in Snow White, when she learns from the mirror that Snow White is still alive and getting married to the prince, she goes to their wedding.
And then she has to dance on burning coals. Yeah, that was Snow White.
Gives her, the iron shoes on hot coals, and she dances till she literally drops dead.
Yeah.
And that's a great party. Don't get me wrong. That's a great party.
That's still the stories I got read, so I didn't get the Disney. I mean, I knew the Disney versions, but the first one I knew were the Brother Grimm.
It's crazy.
Ariel, like the Little Mermaid, because it wasn't Ariel. She dies in the original one. There's no happy end. Yeah, really? She returns back to sea foam. Oh, and when she walks, her feet bleed and stuff, and she has immense pain.
But I think that Ariel was a Danish. I think it's Hans Christian Andersen. That was her. Yeah, but these stories were absolutely brutal, and like they were saying, they want to take it easy on the kids and make it that it's not the parents that do things to their kids, but step parents. But then there's a queen that ends up dropping dead because she's dancing on hot coals until she can't anymore. And there's like people getting, oh my God. It's like, there are other ways to take it easy on kids.
There's also, there's value, not behind these stories. I don't know. There's also value behind these stories. But for example, Little Red Riding Hood is a stranger danger story because the wolf is stranger danger. But I mean,
it's useful.
Her grandmother gets eaten, and then the hunter comes and kills the wolf and cuts him open. Oh, but it's not only a stranger danger story. In the original one, it's like a rape story. So it's like warning you not to trust people because you get raped.
Yeah, that's so it's pretty hardcore. And then also, I often wonder with these things, like, yes, okay, there are lessons, and the Brothers Grimm did mean them as lessons, but then I think about Hansel and Gretel, and basically their stepmother again takes them into the woods. They get lost. They find this house, which this woman has built, made of sweets and candy and stuff, to lure kids into so she can eat them. They end up tricking her, throwing her into the oven, and they steal her treasure, and they go home, and they find out that their stepmother has died in the meantime, which is great for them. So they end up living happily ever after with the treasure that they stole with their father. I'm like, what's the lesson here? Is it that, like, you definitely go into strangers' houses who offer you sweets, because afterwards everything's going to be even better than when you went in? Is that the lesson?
I don't remember what exactly the lesson is, and I don't remember the exact origin story, but I think I read somewhere that it's like, because, in Europe we had a lot of wars, like the 300-year war and the 30-year war and whatever. And I think the story came up during the 30-year war, and literally parents could not feed their children. Right. So instead of starving them, they abandoned them in the forest in the hopes that they would miraculously somehow
that's what the stepmother wanted to do. It was because they
survive.
Were poor. Yeah.
So like the origin, there's like historic context. I don't think there's a particular lesson, but there's historic context behind the story.
But just to be clear, kids, do not go into houses of people who are offering you sweets, because everything will not be better.
Stranger
afterwards.
danger. Stranger danger.
If we learned anything from Red Riding Hood and Hansel and Gretel, that is it. So somehow, I'm so nervous about my daughter, my 6-year-old daughter, watching things like The Lion King and things like that. When I see what kids 100 years ago.
The Lion King?
Because, Nina, when I was a kid and I watched The Lion King and I was a teenager, Mufasa's death traumatized me so much that it remains with me today. It remains.
Really?
I can remember being absolutely traumatized.
I loved that movie.
I thought you were going to say I loved that moment. No, I love the movie. I love the movie. But that moment, it haunts me forever. I'm not sure my daughter is ready for it. How old were you when you saw it?
I don't remember, but the movie came out the year I was born.
Oh my God. So okay. All right. So
the first time I saw it, I was probably like 4, 5, 6.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
I was fine, Sean. I'm fine.
But my point is, I worry about things like that with my 6-year-old. And 100 years ago, they were telling the kids about cutting off their thumbs, dying, like burning alive, and going into, getting eaten by wolves. I think she'll be fine with Lion King.
I mean, our original Saint Nicholas story, right? Like, that here in Bavaria we have the Knecht Ruprecht.
Yeah.
Like Krampus, I think you call him in English countries.
Krampus, yeah.
If you're an evil child, he puts you in his sack and you're gone.
Yeah, and he's a monster. Like the depictions of him.
Krampus is the monster, but here
Krampus.
we have like the Christian version, which is like Knecht Ruprecht. It's like the servant of Niklaus, but he still puts you in a sack and you're gone.
He just takes you away.
Because the monster
Krampus
eats
in Germany?
you. Yeah, there also is a Krampus, but in the Christian version, he turned into a human that doesn't eat you, but you still disappear. But we also know as kids the Krampus story, but as kids, I didn't connect the two.
Okay. Because Krampus is pretty terrifying. I've seen pictures of him.
It is terrifying.
I need to keep my kids away from that.
Yeah.
Yeah, Krampus. So there you go. Parenting 101 from the
if you're evil,
19th century. If you're evil, you die. If you don't listen to your parents, you get appendages cut off. Sometimes death is better, Nina. I would rather die than have my thumb cut off by my parent.
You still have a second thumb.
Yes, I do. That's true. Yeah, there's always a plus side. You're right, Nina. What am I worried about? It's been fun as always, Nina. Thank you for coming on the Germany experience again. Hopefully people will come and listen to our German version. A lot of people do listen to the Die Deutsche und der Ausländer to learn German, which I often warn against. Like, they do not want to learn German from my German, but definitely from your German. They can listen to your German.
I think you're a good example, because people are often afraid. No, people are often, their German is fine. Like your German, it's super good.
Stop it.
But they're just afraid, and I think you're a good example to just go out there. Put yourself out there.
Put yourself out there. Sound terrible.
You're going to be fine.
Nina, as I said, thank you very much for coming on, and I hope you will be back on the German experience sometime.
Always. I love being your guest.
Oh, see ya.
See ya, Sean.